Howie and Beastmode podcast, where we discuss all things business, including growth, strategy, and execution, as well as personal and professional development. Let's join Howie and Beastmode in conversation.
Hey, Beastmode, what's going on?
Man, it's such a great day, Howie. I'm here in downtown Dallas at the farmers market, and so maybe this is the new thing. Where in the world is Beastmode gonna do the podcast from?
I like it. I need to find a more creative spot in my office for myself here. But yeah, it's really good to reconnect here. Last week we talked about addition by subtraction. So basically growth by subtraction. It was part 1, and this is part 2. I don't know if we're going to need a part 3. I'm not sure that we will, but we'll see how it goes. But I thought it was pretty good. We talked about discontentment, apathy, and complacency.
Yeah.
And tonight we've got, depending on how many we get to, we'll have 3 or 4 more bullets to cover. So yeah, glad to reconnect here though.
Yeah, I thought the conversation was very, very key, very timely. I know that as I kind of pondered on it a little bit more, I felt like it was coming up more and more in my conversation throughout the week. It's just,
is that right?
Yeah, as I just kind of reminded people, about, it's not always, growth or a strategy. There always seems to want to be a new thing brought in, but just removing something that's negative or just not producing fruit, pruning it, I think is a good word you used last week.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
It's such a great way to provide growth.
It's a great one. Wow. Well, our first topic for this evening's part 2, addition by subtraction, is addiction. Obviously, a lot of people have different areas of addiction that they have struggled with and that they are struggling with. Some of the reasons why addiction are not good is because you judge yourself and you beat yourself up with the failure of addiction quite a bit, which then perpetuates sometimes a return to that addiction as a way to soothe the actual failure of falling into the addiction. So it creates that real vicious loop. I had a really terrible time with pornography for quite a few years prior to my marriage. The first couple of years of my marriage, I was battling to be free of that, and it was a real challenge. Pornography is obviously famously something that addicts guys, but there is an audience that gets addicted among ladies as well. And so I think a lot of people relate to it. I think it's a tough one. It's embarrassing. I don't particularly like talking about it. But I do remember that, during those times, the addiction would create a vicious circle that if you fail, it kind of creates shame, which then you comfort yourself with more of the same, basically. So, that's one area of addiction. Obviously pornography is something that can break up marriages. Pornography breaks up relationships. It kills confidence. It costs money in a lot of cases, maybe a little bit less now with the internet. I really don't know. But I presume it still can cost money. But yeah, certainly it's bad for, mental health and everything. So I know there's a lot of areas of addiction. Personally, I'm going to flip it back to you here in a couple of seconds, but I did also smoke for about 3.5 years or so in my 20s. That was obviously a little bit of an expensive thing, and it can be risky to health too. And it was really a nightmare getting off of that, by the way, too. They say that that's one of the stronger addictions that you can have is just cigarettes, just nicotine. So I'm pretty sympathetic and pretty humble about the fact that everybody has challenges. And I just want to, before I flip it to you, Beastmode, I'm having a little bit of compassion come over me. And I just want to say to anybody who's listening is that, we love you and we're proud of you. And you have a lot of intrinsic worth that we understand and we appreciate. That worth is given to you by God. And we don't get super spiritual on this podcast, but you guys know, if you listen to more than one, that we do sprinkle some light here and there. And I just want to say that we love you and we're proud of you, and God is. And if you have got an addiction, it's nothing that has to be forever and permanent. It doesn't define who you are. And so have hope and have encouragement. And I would really suggest having a conversation with someone. I'm sure Beastmode and I would be happy to have a call with you, by the way, if you wanted to talk about that. So anyway, I don't normally customarily go that long beast mode before I flip it to you. But I did have that compassion kind of well up in me as I was sharing my tough past.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for sharing. And I mean, you exhibited so many traits in that moment of sharing, of vulnerability. We've talked about that. We talked about transparency. We talked about insights. And so, I mean, even just in that moment of sharing, you know, I'm grateful for that opportunity. And I know that anybody listening, you know, whether it's the same issue or not, 'cause I mean, that's not my issue. My issue was alcohol. You know, for almost a decade, I drank very regularly, sometimes, you know, in exceedingly excess, an abundance of excess, I guess you may say. And sometimes it was just casual. And you know what? Just like you talked about quitting, I probably quit 100 times before I finally stopped for the last time. And so, you know, I just want to continue to encourage everybody, you know, if this is your 5th time to quit, you can still, and you start it back up again, no big deal. If, you know, it can be the last time at any moment. And so there's that encouragement. There's also the same aspect of the overarching positive of that kind of subtraction far outweighs the negative of possibly reverting. So we've talked about that too. When feedback goes wrong, there's times whenever we may have a negative feedback from that time of quitting, whether it's loss of friends, whether it's negative feelings or emotions. Because even if, and again, I guess we're both going to soapbox for a minute, but I know for me, whenever I came and I stopped drinking, those first 2 weeks were awful. You know, it was as my mind and my spirit and emotions and everything was getting cleansed from the toxicity that addictions can have. And so I know we're both talking about some type of, for me, I'm talking about a substance and you're talking about, but again, the addictions can be the same thing in the workplace. And so I know you can have addictions to some of the things that we're going to be talking about. And so I think we're going to be relating back to this portion of it.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, you know, and one of the things that Beast Mode in sometime within our first few podcasts talked about is how things travel, you know, just trying to indicate that everything is connected. And so when you have an area that's out of control, like an addiction, it can certainly affect, you know, family and you know, your health, and it can certainly affect your business. So, you know, these things do travel and they are connected. So, you know, having us bring I think for certain people today, just being aware, just kind of having us bring awareness to the fact that addictions are a thing, I think could be really helpful. So we love you guys, and we're going to be giving you a little bit more compassion than normal maybe on this particular podcast. We're normally a fairly crunchy business podcast and career podcast, but my goodness, how important it is for us to lift you guys up right now. So addiction, you know, I think as far as dealing with addiction, I think first of all is awareness, which we're trying to help with tonight or today, wherever you are. So awareness is one big thing. I think also having someone to talk to that, and you know, Beastman and I have talked about this before. You do want to be careful. You can't just share with everybody, right? Sure. I don't know that I'd go tell your frontline manager, hey, I'm addicted to, you know, cocaine. I don't know that I would do that. I think that would be an unwise situation. I don't know that I'd even tell your HR. I would probably go and talk to an individual counselor or a pastor or a very trusted friend or a parent or something, you know, versus an employer. I mean, you know, you have to use some caution, of course, unless you're totally sure that they are, you know, with you until the end kind of situation. But I think talking to someone, awareness and talking to someone, Beast Mode, for me would be a couple steps.
Yeah, I think it's just understanding the unfortunate but yet fortunate normalcy of addiction. I know that a lot of times in cultures, you know, we want to rank addictions. oh, well, this one's worse than the other one, and throws shame on things. I'm not a fan of that. I don't think just because, my addiction was alcohol and somebody else's is cocaine doesn't mean one has a different severity than another. I don't think that at all. I think it's unfortunate that it is so prevalent, but I think it's fortunate in the fact that we should be able to say, hey, you know what, whatever my issue is, I'm in that boat, and I could use some help. I could use a listening ear more than a counselor. I could use somebody who's just says, hey man, I've been there. And I think we're both raising our hands saying that and just saying, I don't have all the answers except for I know what personally resurrected me. And that's faith, and that's through Jesus Christ. And that's another topic that if you come to the group later, you'll get a fair dose of that. So.
Yeah, we have a life group, guys. So some of you may not be aware, but we have a gateway group with our church. And so this podcast is every week, and then the gateway group is every other week. And we get into more of the spiritual side on the every other week. It's actually the second and fourth Tuesday. You can find us. Actually, I would just say message us would be easy. But yeah, so I think, yeah. And by the way, to be honest, my relationship with Christ was a very paramount way that I beat addiction myself. For me, I did talk about it. I talked to my wife about it, who helped me. But definitely, your spiritual relationship, guys, is a real superpower in working on that, as well as transparency. Yeah. Well, what about fear? Addition by subtraction. This one will, it's actually interesting because this one can hit in your career. This one can hit in your business, and of course personal as well. But what are you thinking about here in terms of addition by subtraction, getting rid of fear?
Yeah, I think I'll just speak from what I think hits me the most. Being an entrepreneur, there's a lot of fear of this is going to fail. There's a lot of fear of is this idea any good? I know in the beginning there was a fear of what separates me from everybody else. That was probably the main thing that kept me from being an entrepreneur for the longest time was, there's, I don't know how you're different. How do you open a new restaurant? How do you open up a new car dealer? I mean, there's so many, right? And then really that fear, has to be removed, right? You can't productivity fear away. You can't grow fear away. You have to physically remove the root. And by physically removing the root, it's just shining light on it. Is that really something to be fearful of? If I fail at starting this business, will it bring the negative result that I fear that it will? No. Maybe it'll hurt because I've lost some funds or something like that. But ultimately, if I'm able to gain insight or gain wisdom or perspective, then quite frankly, I'm far better off having attacked that fear and removing it by that subtraction. So.
That's good. It's interesting because I have a fear. As Beastmode knows, I work out, I lift weights 3 times a week, and it's a fairly extensive endeavor. He does it in sprints with more frequent workouts, but shorter time, which might even be better, but it's just not my style. I do a little longer ones, and then I do them just 3 times a week. Other than, you guys probably can't tell, I'm cycling up my desk here. I have a desk cycle. So I do that as well. But pretty much my strenuous workouts is just 3 times a week, but they're pretty long. But I got to tell you, I'm afraid of my workouts because they hurt a lot. I do a lot of reps. I do pretty heavy weights, at least heavy for me, right? I mean, we're all individual. We all judge ourselves, not compare against somebody else. But even comparing against someone else, I'm afraid of the pain. And so last night, by the way, I mildly injured my right wrist. So it's not like there's not any risk. I mean, there is to working out those risks to that. I'm afraid of dropping. I'm alone. I'm afraid of dropping this heavy stuff on myself. The kind of the weights that I have are not rubber. So I'm worried that this exposed metal is going to hit me. I mean, there are real safety things. I'm thinking about when I buy more weights to buy the rubberized ones, actually, since I am working out alone. So maybe when I get a job, that'll be a reward for myself. But you know what? For me, it's just the fear of the pain. It's not really the injury. It's not even secondary. Injury is just like an afterthought. Because you can't really imagine dropping something on your chest and hurting yourself. That's hard to really imagine. I can't believe I have to do all of these or whatever it may be. And so, last night I had a little bit of a breakthrough and just recognizing, okay, it looks like, because this is happening I've been doing this for 3 years. And I just read last night, I realized this fear is going to always be here. Or at least it's always going to try to be here, I guess is what I should say. And so I just told myself, I just have to deal with it. And so I think the same thing with whether in business, whether, you may not like to cold call. And by the way, I think working out is relevant, by the way, because some of you are afraid to get started and you're out of shape and, you have, you're not doing any favors for your business or your family or anything else by being super out of shape. So it is, you may be facing that fear, but in business, it may be that you're afraid of failure. You're afraid someone's going to laugh at you. You're afraid someone's going to think that your idea is stupid. You're afraid that it's not going to work, or you're going to be yelled at. If you're going to cold call, the fear of a cold caller is that you're going to look stupid or you're going to get yelled at. Usually, those are two pretty common ones. But we have to make calls to business owners, or we're not going to sell anything. And you're not going to sell solely by email. 70% of appointments come from the phone, and only 30% from email. So that's not going to work. So dealing with that kind of fear in business is a really big thing. And I think Beastmode, really highlighted that, people are afraid of starting or running a business, or even we've talked about in the past, starting or running an initiative within a business. Same kind of fear, you're afraid you're going to get rejected or whatever it may be. But seriously, what are we doing? I mean, what else do you have to do? I mean, let's face those fears. Let's give it a name too. I mean, I think if you, at least, my wife knows this well about me, which is that if I have something that's bothering me, if I talk about it, 50% of the issue is just being able to talk about it. So if you can just write down or talk to somebody about, hey, I'm having this fear about my business or about my job or whatever, I think that'll at least take some of the pressure off because you've given it a name instead of suffering in silence.
I think partially, though, is there's a rationality. Fear of working out alone and having weights fall on you, that's a righteous fear, right? If you didn't have that fear, I would tell you, you should have that. Yeah. You need to be cognitively aware and take the necessary precautions and exercise good judgment. Those are positive, but if the fear is so overwhelming that I fear that, it's going to happen, that I project that it has happened, and so I don't work out, now I've gone irrational, And so I hate cold call. I'm not even going to lie. I'm going to be totally transparent. I hate doing it. For part of the reason why you said, part of it is the productivity. There's other things that I feel like I could be doing that are more beneficial. And so but I know, number one, I'm not bad. I'm not great, but I'm definitely not bad. And so honestly, I just start rationalizing with myself, and I just understand, okay, if they hang up, if they say that was the stupidest thing ever, okay, well, they're not my client anyways, and, I just got to move along. But I think that's a business, personal, whatever. If you can look that fear, give it a name, rationalize, say, is this justified? And then maybe, okay, that's all right. I shouldn't be afraid of this, or I should have a healthy understanding of this. And then if not, then, you're able to move right past it.
Good. What about dishonesty? I think, dishonesty was our next bullet. I think there might be a relationship sometimes, Beastmode, with dishonesty and with the last point, which is fear.
Yeah. Yeah. And with addiction, I'm going to be the total opposite and be so honest that, when you have an addiction of any kind, maybe you're overworking yourself and you're dishonest with your time, you're dishonest with what you should be doing. If you're fearful, you're dishonest with yourself about how rational the fear should be. You overhype it and say, I do have a reason to be fearful because I want to remain fearful. But dishonesty in the workplace and the personal, the freedom from the guilt and the shame of dishonesty, I'll tell you from somebody who was dishonest for a long time, to my spouse, to family, to workers, the freedom of just being able to say, this is exactly who I am. This is exactly the struggles. This is exactly thoughts or feelings, and not being a jerk about it. It's such a weight off you. It's such an addition to health, to emotional health, to physical health, to not have to drag this weight of dishonesty around. I mean, if I can help somebody cut that chain tonight of dropping the dishonesty at the door, then I'll gladly do that. It's
good.
important.
Yeah. I think for me, dishonesty comes in usually with fear. It's sort of like the fear happens and then dishonesty happens. And I think that I was listening to something by Jordan B. Peterson recently. He talked about, he realized he wanted to start off by either telling the truth or by at least not lying. And as he started to evaluate his thoughts and he started to evaluate his words, he realized that he was lying 90 or maybe some kind of dishonesty, whatever that means, not necessarily direct lying, but not being, not saying things that made him stronger, but saying things that made him weaker 95% of the time. And he realized that he was just a mess. And so I think if we start to evaluate dishonesty and honesty, which I wish our politicians would do sometimes, or people who argue about political things, I wish they would do that. But I have been evaluating myself too. And it's funny, I've made Beastmode laugh a couple of times in the past, probably 6 weeks or so. I remember 2 times I made him laugh because I told him something that was a little bit blunt that I didn't want to do. And I just made him laugh because it was a little bit unexpected, but just trying to work on that honesty kind of approach a little bit. And also because I can't, I can easily overcommit to stuff or whatever. So just because I want to be nice, sometimes I'll say, but that's not maybe very honest if I'm going to end up being late or I can't do it or I have to cancel or I am robbing my business or my family or something because I shouldn't have said yes or whatever it may be. I don't know. But yeah, so I've made him laugh a couple times. But I really am working on this topic of trying to be honest and sometimes correcting myself mid-sentence too, and just saying, you know what, that's not right. That's not accurate or whatever it may be. So it's not a perfect thing, but I think the direction of that is really good though. There's something behind that.
The empowerment of being honest. I don't know out of the topics that we've talked about tonight or even last night, just the shift from dishonesty to honesty, the empowerment, the immediate empowerment that you have. I don't know if there's something that compares to that. And we've talked about this before about dishonesty is a mask that you wear. And until, and back to business, if a business has a mask of dishonesty, and a lot of times it starts at the top, and a lot of times it starts because we're not transparent, we're not vulnerable, we're not insightful, we're not doing the things that we talk about. But if there's a mask of dishonesty, it transitions all the way down to the bottom. People are dishonest about time, they're dishonest about productivity, they're dishonest about their willingness or desire to work for said company. It's awful. But the empowerment of just taking it off, taking that mask off, it's awesome.
Interesting. Because it may be that even our relationships are on a false premise. If we're building up friendships or relationships based on a false persona, I mean, that's not a very, what if you slowly shifted to where you're telling everybody the truth, or at least not lying. That's his other thing is tell the truth or at least don't lie. Because there may be times where telling the truth would be damaging or something, so that's understandable, right? We have to use wisdom here too. But telling the truth or at least not lying, I feel like everybody can do. And then I think people will get to know you more for who you really are instead of the mask.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. The mask has to come off, and I was trying to think of the author's name. That's why I kind of paused for a minute. But he talked about it. We actually talked about it in a podcast probably 2 or 3 months ago about from Michael Brody Waite. Do you remember that podcast where we talked about the different masks? And he talked about it that in business, that if you're dishonest in business, then the honest self of you should get fired. So if I'm dishonest in the workplace, then my honest version of myself doesn't belong there. And so I don't belong there.
Got it. Wow. Interesting.
Yeah, it was
I talked about that in different ways at least twice before. I would say I didn't realize it was in reference to a book, but yeah, that's good. I get it. I do get it.
Yeah.
So dishonesty. I want to talk a little bit about dishonesty and the flip side of that, but I interrupted you. So go ahead and go, and I'll talk about something.
No, go ahead.
Well, I've posted about this on LinkedIn at least twice, I believe, but I did post about it really recently, like the last 6 weeks, I would say. And that was that some of my best sales moves have come from telling the customer something hard. And so, whether it be, I think a couple of the quick examples that would help you guys out would be, number one, that I'm sitting here suffering with something that I'm worried about, let's say in a selling situation, and I'm afraid to bring it up because then if I confirm that my concern is valid, then the deal might be dead, right? But then I'm living, if I'm doing that, first of all, I'm suffering alone, when the customer could be brought into that conversation and I could be honest with them and I could say that, hey, I have this concern about XYZ getting approval. Am I just making that up, or how do you feel about that? Maybe can we interact on that a little bit, and just bringing the customer into your concern and having that vulnerability, I think would be really good. And then it may be that your concern is valid, in which case, the deal might never have happened and you would have wasted 6 months on it, right? So I think if you have that, if you bring your customer into your moment of honesty, it's a lot better than suffering silently, which is really kind of a dishonesty. At least it's dishonest to yourself, but one could argue it's dishonest to them as well. So that move has helped me quite a bit. It's something that I would say I just started implementing in 2019, I would say. I mean, maybe there was moments before that, but it became an official sales move for me. Literally telling the truth and saying the hard question became an official sales move, either I would say probably last year or this year. And then I don't think I have a second example, to be honest. I think I might have had one initially and I may be gone now. But I think I would just encourage you guys to don't suffer alone in the business situation. Jordan or Beastmode, sorry, too transparent there. But another example just came to me, because we know there's a lot of non-sellers, there's business owners, and there's people that are in account management or customer success or support or whatever, other types of roles. I think honestly, in those situations, when you're not selling a customer, you're supporting a customer or whatever, or maybe you don't work with end customers, you only work with internal people. But again, having the courage to be honest about situations, I think will build trust in any part of business.
Yeah. I love the perspective that you were talking about, the shift in your mindset. I know for me, it was revolutionary to me. It felt like a totally new idea to just be completely open and honest. And now I couldn't imagine having a conversation, especially in business, any other way. To just tell somebody, hey, you're not a great fit, but here's a competitor, here's somebody else who's a great fit. Hey, I'm not going to do this deal with you, even though you're requesting this deal, because it's not a good deal for you.
Wow, I love that.
You know, I have no problem doing that, because I know the last time I had a feeling, and it was almost 5 years ago, where I got a deal done, I got a sale, and at the very end of it, I felt awful just because I didn't particularly lie. I wasn't dishonest. I just wasn't forthright. You know, I knew that it probably could work, but maybe not, you know, and I couldn't do it. And I just said, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm going to just tell you, hey, these are all the positives. These are all the negatives. I'm not sweet talking you. I'm not selling you. I believe that this is going to work. You know, whatever it is, now with JL, I believe that clarifying your mission, clarifying your purpose will dramatically change your business. And if you don't agree, then that's okay. You're just not my customer, you know? And I've come to that understanding, you know? Yeah, it's so good.
It's interesting being on this job search, because I've had to tell several people no, and I could have settled, and I could have, you know, taken a step back. Today I had an opportunity that I said no to, where I could have taken a step back. But I'm trying to be true to, you know, the types of roles that I, you know, have handled, you know, recently, and that I want to handle, because I'm trying to stretch myself and not shrink back in spite of economic, needs. Because I know there's a long story with there. There's kind of an authenticity to myself as well. What about, and I think we're about out of time, but what's a quick snapshot on overzealousness? When we talk about addition by subtraction, subtracting overzealousness, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think there's a desire for overzealousness, a desire to do too much, to stretch yourself, to maybe step outside who you are as a person, who you are as a business. And it's just dangerous. You know, sometimes adding a new product or a new service is not the best move. Sometimes consolidation.
Wow, thank you for covering this.
It is exactly what you need to do. And you just stay home. This is who I am. This is who I am as a person. This is who I am as a business. And I don't have to be Amazon, you know?
Good.
So that's a quick version.
Well, it's interesting because I just talked about stretching myself in terms of career. So there are times that you need to stretch yourself, but there's also a super important thing, which is focus. And, you know, so that's one thing I've done. It's funny you bring this up, because you're talking about the perfect tension of this topic, because I brought up that I'm currently working on, you know, stretching myself a little bit, or at least not going backwards in my career, and, you know, taking on, you know, more, responsibility or whatever it may be. But also I've said no to a lot of stuff because I didn't want to be overzealous. I have already said no to a consulting business. I've said no to 2 or 3 clients already, by the way, because I need to have a full-time job right now. So overzealousness would be, I'm trying to do everything, and I'm trying to take on consulting clients and look for a full-time job, which means that I may fail at both, or, you know, just maybe fail at getting a job because I'm doing full-time consulting. So overzealousness is a really big deal, and we've talked about the power of saying no in a previous podcast. And I think that fits in really nicely for addition by subtraction. Is a good reminder of the power of saying no.
Yeah, totally agree. Want to thank everybody for tuning in today. Again, we're on YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. It should be starting this week on Audible and on Amazon Podcast. And so we're grateful for the opportunity to continue this conversation with you guys. We hope that we're inviting you guys in to have this conversation afterwards.
Awesome.
All right, we'll see you next time.